But God said there are limits to what you are allowed to do, and Satan had to obey what God told him to do. There's no open rebellion between Satan and God, or the angels that supported Satan, his adversarial spiritual forces throughout the world. Shalom, this is ben-Emmett with the Torah Watchman Show International. I hope everyone's been well. I have an exciting video short for you. It's another topical type contextual lecture, short and brief, straight to the point. We all like short and brief, right? Because we all suffer from severe attention deficit disorder, don't we? All kidding aside. Love you all. The title of this video is, What is the Origin of the Devil? That is something that everyone's been asking, right? We blame everything on the devil. We see a demon here and there, the devil made me do it. We hear all of this and everything else, especially in the Middle Ages. It was really, really superstitious during those times. This is the core culture, per se, of our sages and rabbis of the Talmud, that they recorded all kinds of strange and bizarre anomalies and happenings during the Middle Ages. But let's begin with a word that you've heard before, and I've already done another video on this. It's known as Zoroastrianism, which is a Persian philosophical construct to try to explain why the world is what it is, about fate and destiny, good and bad outcomes in people's lives. It was in the middle 6th century BCE. If that time frame sounds familiar, this was approximately the time right before King Nebuchadnezzar II invaded Jerusalem and in waves conquered the city, burned down the temple, and took Jews to Babylon, namely the prophet Daniel and the prophet Ezekiel. So it's about the same time frame. So this in Persia, per se, this was a belief system. Now, Babylonia had similar beliefs. Zoroastrianism is believed to existed even before that time. But we're talking about the core cultural religious sect of theology that was dominated Persia during the time. Probably I'd say King Cyrus II. He was an individual that believed in Zoroastrianism. Now, the figure most comparable to the devil and this Persian belief system was known as the Angra Mainyu, also known as the Ahriman in Persian. The Jews didn't invent the devil. The Christians certainly didn't invent the devil. The devil's been around quite some time in various myths, in Greek mythology, and things of this nature. But this entity was actually referred to as a evil god. Okay? So it represents the evil spirit and is an embodiment of darkness and destruction, constantly battling against the forces of good, led by the Ahura Mazda, which is the Zoroastrian God. Now, Zoroastrianism had, I would say, a bipolar monotheistic belief system. They believed in a good creating God, and then they believed in an evil God, which is a destroyer, an entity of darkness, maybe a demonic presence or something like that, that dominated the twilight world of the dead. Okay? Now I'm going to break out some key characteristics of Zoroastrianism. Concept of duality. You've heard the word duality before, okay? Zoroastrianism is fundamentally based on the idea of cosmic struggle between good and evil. Again, with the Angra Mainyu being the personification of evil. Now, I'm not talking about Lucifer in the Christian New Testament. I'm talking about any of that. If this sounds familiar, this is a segue I'm getting to how one faith, one belief system was copied over a period of time from nation to nation, from culture to culture. Now, the role in creation, according to Zoroastrianism believes the Angra Mainyu is not a creation of the Ahura Mazda, but rather an independent opposing force that exists alongside him. And in South Korea and in China, we hear about yin and yang and that kind of two dualistic forces of good and evil, black and white, that kind of contrast. That sounds familiar too, right? Impact on other religions. Zoroastrianism had a huge significant impact on all world religion, beginning with the 6th century BCE. Many scholars believe the concept of Satan and the so-called Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam draws inspiration from the Zoroastrianism figure of Angra Mainyu. Now, a 2nd century Christian evangelist, I believe was a Roman citizen because he lived in Rome. He was known as Marcion of Sinope and Marcion of Rahassos. These two individuals were both Christian heretics in the 2nd century who challenged the traditional Christian beliefs of the time. Like, for instance, the Nazarenes that followed supposedly Jesus during the 1st century, the Essenes and other poor individuals, very humble individuals. You hear about the Qumran caves and the other manuscripts and things that were found in jars and vases and things like that during that time frame. Well, the Marcion of Sinope and his protege, Marcion of Rahassos, they were evangelists for Christianity. They actually had their own gospel. None of them survived, but he did have a version of Luke, which is very interesting. He also didn't believe in the same key concepts of Zoroastrianism, in that he believed in a good God and an evil God. Guess who was the evil God? Well, the evil God was the God of Moshe. All the legalistic and very impossible laws to keep and everything else that made everyone's life miserable and impossible to follow, and impossible to find redemption and salvation. Well, that was that evil God. The good God was the good God of Jesus, that kind of thing. The redemption message of Jesus and everything else. But Marcion did not believe in the Trinity. Let's get that straight. The Gospel of Luke, believe it or not, for Christians out there, was more about redemption. So Jesus dying on a cross would make you mourn his death and have empathy for this individual. And then that would prompt you to, through self-introspection, to ask for forgiveness for your own sins, not through Jesus' death, but as a direct result of his death, as an outcome of emotional empathy. Luke was very different than Matthew in that respect, okay? Also, Marcionism and Docetism, respectively, those two terms went hand in hand. You may have heard of deism and that kind of thing. Thomas Jefferson in the United States of America, one of our founding fathers, was known as a deist. He essentially believed God created the heavens, the earth, and then not like a helicopter parent, but left everything essentially to go to hell, and took his hands off of everything and let it go to war and famine and death and everything else. Okay, this was deism. Actually, was a key concept of Zoroastrianism, and a key concept of Marcionism. Okay, we're all fairly confused now. Marcion of Sinope, a Christian theologian and evangelist who lived in Rome around 144 CE. He developed a dualistic belief system that distinguished between the God of the Old Testament, like I said, and the God of the New Testament, which everyone would think that is the God that loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that who would believe in him would have everlasting life. We're talking about God and Jesus in the New Testament, at least the way God was portrayed in the Hellenistic belief of the New Testament writers, okay? Now, he totally rejected the Old Testament. He was anti-Semitic to the Jewish people. He relegated everything that they believed in as something old and deprecated and not useful anymore. He acknowledged that there was a Jewish Bible, but he didn't think it had any significance, since the new God presented himself to his son Jesus. You can see how these belief systems were a mixed bag of things that most Christians believe in today. Now, he actually compiled a canon of 11 books, and getting close to the 2nd century, they actually were moving away from scrolls of papyrus and books that you would roll up back and forth in a scroll. Well, they were actually putting binders in books and starting thinking about chapters and breakouts and things like that during that time. Now, his New Testament was much shorter. He favored the Gospel of Luke above everything else, and the 10 of the 13 Pauline epistles or letters. His teachings appealed to the Gentiles who found the Old Testament burdensome. You imagine a Greek in Ephesus. Why would they want to keep the Jewish code? Why would they want to keep the 613 mitzvah? Why would they want to bother with circumcision or eating kosher food? Maybe they like pork chops, I don't know. But at that time, Marcionism was the most favored variant of Christianity at that time. It spread like wildfire. Now, Marcion of Source is a leader of a docetic sect of Christianity at Rossauce, allegedly the author of the Gospel of Peter. You heard about that before. It never made it in the New Testament canon. May have been the same person as Marcion of Sinope. So there's two personalities mentioned here, but it could have been just one person, known for different writings, different theories, theological constructs, and things of this nature. But it's very interesting that whoever wrote the book of Luke, it's not saying that Marcion wrote the book of Luke. It says that he favored the redemption message that Luke had at that time. You can imagine he only favored one gospel, 10 of the 13 letters that Apostle Paul wrote. Now, Marcion's teachings had a significant impact on early Christianity. Up to about 325 CE, when Emperor Constantine decided to be baptized and become a Christian, and then order as the Emperor of Rome at that time for everyone to be baptized and become Christians. He favored a Trinitarian belief versus, or in contrast to the Marcionian belief, which is more monotheistic, with underpinnings of Zoroastrianism, good God and bad God. Be fair, in Judaism, we have our own belief system of what the devil is, Satan, and other things of this nature. So bear with me. Primarily in the Zohar. Now, again, the Zohar, if people know anything about Kabbalah, the Zohar, I said before in one of my other videos on Zoroastrianism, that there are 23 volumes of this. And I have copies of that in my home. And it's very metaphysical. Everything has a spiritual connection. There it talks about multiverse of reality, in which we coexist in a multiverse between the corporeal world and the world of spirits and angels and, yes, demons and things of this nature. It's also known as Jewish myth. The devil is described as a force that tempts humans to sin and destroys the divine spark within them. Notice what I said. Even the Jewish leaders, sages, Kabbalah, that was their version or variant of the Talmud, essentially, of Jewish history and folklore. They simply believe that Satan's whole purpose, the devil, was to seduce men and cause them to sin, to destroy that nefesh, that neshama within them, that godly spirit that we're all born with. Now, the devil has many, many different names. I already told you about the name of the devil in Zoroastrianism back in the 6th century BCE. Satan means deceiver in Hebrew, or adversarial force. The incarnation of evil who descends from heaven to lead astray and then returns to accuse humans. Now, what I'm saying here, before you let your imagination go wild, Satan was an angel created for the sole purpose of prosecuting the virtue of mankind. Mankind's virtue is critically important to the Lord our God. Why? Because he created us with free will. Now, would you rather have someone to love you from a contrite and sincere spirit and heartfelt message of love, which is more than words, it's devotion and everything else. Love under task and sacrifice is the greatest of all kinds of love. And this is why God loved that kind of human interaction, empathy, and that kind of thing. How shallow is a person? In other words, how strong and how real and sincere their love is? Well, when it's put under the task, like in a difficult marriage, or you're having difficult children, or how far will you go when you love your child, even though they do everything they can to backstab you, to betray you, and that kind of thing. So again, what I'm saying is, this is why God has assigned the angel Satan for this purpose. And there's something known as a Quilapov. Now this is a representation of evil or impure spiritual forces. The opposites of Serat, okay? These are terms you'll find in Kabbalah. Essentially, it was talking about you have Satan, then you have impure spiritual forces, which you can say angels that work underneath Satan for the purpose of seducing mankind. While these spiritual forces can also be referred to, if they're negative, as demonic entities, okay? I'm not saying any of this is real. I'm comparing apples and oranges here between Zoroastrianism, which is a Persian belief system, Christian belief system like Marcion, and Judaism. Also, they had to explain why the world was what it was, okay? Why can you not have a health? Why do your 2 children die of the Black Plague? Trying to explain all these wars and famine and things of this nature, why you're exiled in Spain instead of living in Jerusalem, trying to explain why things are happening so bad, okay? Now, there's something known as a Sitra Angra, which is a realm of evil, which translates to the other side, essentially Gehenna, okay? So the Nama is actually a demon described in the Zohar who often conflated with another Nama, a sister of Tubal-Cain. You know, it says that when Cain killed or murdered his brother Abel, he went to the land of Nod. Whatever humans were there for him to cohabitate with and build his own tribe. How? Well, the Zohar attempted to explain this. The Zohar describes Satan's actions in a courtroom drama where he is delighted with human sins because of evil, and evil is self-obsessed. The Zohar also describes a metaphor of the harlot and the prince, where the harlot hopes that the prince will not listen to her, so she will be beloved to the king. These are stories, okay, like fairy tale. Some Jews believe Satan is not a separate being. Some Jews don't even believe in hell, and much less a devil. But they rather have a tendency that instead of Satan being an entity or something real, it's rather a tendency that exists in every human being to do wrong, because we're creatures of free will, right? And again, we don't want to blame every bad thing we do and every bad choice we make on the devil, right? We and we alone are responsible for our own sinful behavior. Now, despite everything I just told you, what is God's opinion on this, okay? Now, Satan is referred in the Jewish Bible or Tanakh as the princesses of the world and the adversary. Those forces that are in contrary to God's will, his ideal will, and outcome and future for mankind. Think about the stumbling block of Yaakov and how Israel sinned against God and how they were invaded and occupied by foreign powers and then driven out of their land, okay? Regardless, Satan is a Moloch, and literally in Hebrew, Moloch means messenger, and in English vernacular, it means angel, okay? It's a messenger of God who has limited autonomy, okay? But it's an intelligent entity, but they follow the commands of God. That's how they're programmed as God's messengers and soldiers. They are angels that have no souls or will of their own. They are programmed and created for one purpose, to be messengers of God. Whether that's speaking, telling, or delivering important information, like to the kings of the nations, okay? So, Satan or the deceiver is inferred in the Genesis story, Bereshit, we all know all too well. Probably the most famous story that most cultures, religions know. You know, the beginning of the heaven and the earth, the first man, the first woman, when the tree of knowledge of good and evil, well, in the Garden of Eden, well, he is portrayed here as a serpent, okay? The serpent was described as a bipedal, sentient animal that could think and communicate just like humans. Now, Adam was looking for a companion, right? And then the most logical choice would have been the serpent creature. Now, Satan is not called out by name anywhere in the book of Genesis, in Bereshit. But he may be inferred because of the behavior and personality that's demonstrated throughout the Torah. And most Torah scholars conclude that the serpent was more than likely the adversary, the deceiver, or Satan, or the devil. Now, Satan is mentioned predominantly in the book of Job. Regardless, this entity tempted Adam and Havilah or Eve to cause them to make a choice as free will beings between good and evil. Just like mankind today, we are not born into evil, but able to choose evil through our own full array of free will choices. Okay? This is a fundamental Jewish belief. We are not born evil, but we have freedom to do evil or good based on our choices. Satan is mentioned predominantly in the first chapter of Job, as I mentioned, as a subservient agent of God. Please, Christians, if you listen to me, read the first chapter of Job. If you have any confusion whatsoever with Judaism's version of the devil versus your version of the devil, okay? It is very clear the story here. Job was a very righteous servant of God, someone who God could actually brag on, and it was actually a court discussion in the heavenly court of Shamayim. Satan came before God, and God said, "Have you seen my servant Job?" And of course, they made a wager and a deal here. You know, Satan said he only loves you because you give him everything. If you allow me to take everything away from him, he will curse your name and then just want to die. And God says, "You're wrong about my servant. You're allowed to do X, Y, Z to Job, but you cannot take his life." It's very interesting. Now, Satan may have wanted to destroy Job's life, take his life, burn down his house, kill his children, take away his possession, put boils all over his body. But God said there are limits to what you are allowed to do, and Satan had to obey what God told him to do. There's no open rebellion between Satan and God, or the angels that supported Satan, his adversarial spiritual forces throughout the world. God was in full control of Satan's behavior, his actions, and decision making here. Okay? Read the first chapter of Job, or read all the book of Job, if you have any question about what I'm telling you. Now, Satan's accusations in the end in the book of Job, was proved false. God was proved right, and God restored more to Job than he had before. Why? God loves the sinner. What am I saying? The greatest form of love that a human being can show God. Someone who is downtrodden, someone who is a sinner, and then they clean themselves up. They make good on the pain they've caused around other people. They make retribution. They fall on their face and say, "I'm a sinner, please forgive me." That kind of love is a glory hallelujah before God. It truly is. Another reference of Satan appears in a vision to accuse Joshua the high priest. I like this. Zechariah chapter 8, verse 1. What happens in this vision? Well, in this vision, Joshua stands before angel of the Lord wearing dirty clothes. This is probably a night vision, something that actually has parallels with it between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. And this is a central point of Kabbalah that we see and as not always believe in, because there are other things behind what we see that coexist with us. Spiritual things, metaphysical. Now, in this vision, you had Joshua standing before the angel of the Lord, maybe Gabriel, and he was wearing dirty, filthy clothes. Satan stands at Joshua's right, ready to accuse him. He has dirty, filthy clothes because he has sin in his life. if we could actually behold our sinful natures, the sin that we carry within our minds and heart, our human lust, desires, anger against other people, unforgiving grudges and things like that, can you imagine how ugly sin would be? What this was the comparison, his vision here. Satan saw dirty, filthy rags. God saw something worth saving. Now the angel tells those standing by Joshua to remove his dirty clothes. The angel tells Joshua that he had taken away his sin and will clothe him in rich garment. He's forgiven Joshua for what happened. A long story short, what happened in Joshua's life, he was a Kohen Gadol, who was nominated by high priest during that time. And his sons had married Gentile wives. And of course, they were also Levitical priests, and they sinned against God, and he was not a good parent to them. Okay? The angel instructs Joshua to obey the Lord and rule in the Lord's temple. So what is filthy and dirty, according to the world's view of people and Satan, is something beautiful inside. Remember, King David was just a teenager, a shepherd boy, smaller in stature than his brothers. What God saw in King David at that time as a shepherd boy, when the prophet Samuel went to him, was a king. The angel says that the Lord will bring his servant the branch to Joshua. This branch, of course, is the menorah that he was responsible for lighting with olive oil and the cleansed temple of that time. This was in a time frame, incidentally, probably right around Ezra and Nehemiah, I would imagine, or shortly after. In conclusion, Satan is mentioned rarely among the books of the Jewish Bible. It's not very predominant. I mean, God likes to focus on the positive. Now, there's a lot of judgments, the Great Flood, and other things like that, the Tower of Babel, the expulsion of Israel from the land, the Promised Land, and things of that nature. But there's a lot of optimistic, hopeful things throughout the Jewish Bible. Satan is not discussed. He's kind of trying to say, you see an actor on TV, like Die Hard or something, Bruce Willis or whatever, and you actually have a stuntman or double that's actually doing all the difficult, miraculous things, acting, car racing, jumping off buildings, fire, and all this. Well, Satan is kind of in the back scenes of that. When God wants him to do something, he calls him. He gives him very limited autonomy, and periodically he comes before God's throne, and he accuses mankind of all their sins, of all the deadly sins, right? But it's not mentioned very predominantly. It's mentioned predominantly throughout the Christian Bible. You read the book of Revelation, you're talking about 666, the beast that rises out of the sea of politics and everything else, the Antichrist, all this stuff. Jesus casting out demons and into pigs. Mary Magdalene, was demon possessed. All this stuff is all sewn within the New Testament, but you don't see it at every single corner like in the that's in the Christian Bible versus Jewish Bible. Some Christians focus more on angels and demons to explain their ill fate and a life under the context of fallen world taught by Apostle Paul. You go in a Christian bookstore, you see book after book is a whole section of angels. Some people pray to angels. Some people have statues of angels in their home. Catholic cemeteries are dominated by statues of Mother Mary and angels. Okay, it may make people feel comfortable when they have these statues and things like this, but it is a form of idolatry, and Jews do not have any graven images in their homes, and they don't have graven images in their places of worship, in their synagogues either. But, Apostle Paul had to explain. His goal was to prove the depravity of man in his fallen state so that nothing could save them other than his version of the Messiah. If you ask Paul to explain his theological constructs, he would probably say it's a great mystery. Cults often explain away their false messages. In summary, we talked about the origin of the devil going back at least the 6th century BCE, probably much earlier. because we're talking about Persian belief and Babylon. Actually, Persian actually ascribed many of their beliefs on the good gods and bad gods of their world, of their so-called universe. They probably copied that belief system from Babylonia, or even the Assyrians before that. And of course, the Roman Empire, they probably didn't have any kind of original thoughts, because they ascribed the gods in Greek mythology. You ever read a book about Hercules and Zeus and Athena and Pluto and all these things? Well, these gods had different names in the Roman Empire. When they worshiped these gods, they had temples and things like that, and sacrifices before these gods too. They essentially copied the belief system of every other national power and added it to their culture, okay, their worldview. Well, Zoroastrianism didn't just go away. It was a foundational theological construct that actually became something that was very significant in the founding of the Christian faith. It's very easy to say that the Old Testament versus New Testament is deprecated, it's not useful, it's not significant anymore. If you think about that as governed by a bad God, an evil God, versus the good God who speaks in Greek and would give his only begotten son, to save the world, the Gentile population. Well, I thought you would think this video is interesting, give you some history. Listen, there are heretics among every single religion. Even among Judaism, there are heretics. Okay? Most Orthodox rabbis don't like Kabbalah. They don't like the Zohar. My Cardi brethren thinks it's witchcraft and necromancy and sorcery and everything else. Maybe it is. But it is part of our culture and tradition, and we have to understand the difference between fact and fiction. Do you believe in the devil? Is it really that important? I encourage you to believe in the love and grace and kindness of the holy God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Believe in that loving kindness in your life. Don't focus on things you have no control over. Yes, there are negative spiritual forces out there that seduce us to draw us away from that love and grace and put things upon God's face that are false and try to create God in your own image. As has been said before, the difference between God of the Jews and the God of the Christians is that God created man in his own image. Christians created God in their image. Take care. Shalom Aleichem. Ahura Ben-Emmett signing out until the next time. If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.